All right, everyone, why don't we get started? I see Dr. Jones is with us, and I know I am anxious to get started. This is such an important moment to be in conversation with Dr. Alisha Lola Jones and to hear more about her scholarship and her work on our webinar today. First, let me say thank you all for joining us today for the Black Theology and Leadership Institute's July webinars. These three webinars are the art, the theology, and the ethics of worship, proclamation, practice, and protest in a pandemic. My name is Sushama Austin Connor, and I am the founding program director of the Black Theology and Leadership Institute, lovingly known to many of us as BTLI. I'd first like to just share two housekeeping details with you. One is that if you have any technical difficulties during our webinar and need assistance, email our PTS tech support who are actually online with us, but email them at media.help@ptsem.edu. That would be the same email that came in your confirmation emails as well. Help requests should just be made by providing your first and last name, a mention of whatever your technical issue is, and if you could add a phone number, so in case PTS Tech cannot help via email, they may need to call you. Second, we will have time for questions with Dr. Alisha Lola Jones. So to ask your questions, we ask that you either type in the chat or raise your hand during the using the raise hand icon, and you'll be called on. I think we're all pretty familiar with that now that we're all Zoom experts in quarantine. Dr. Tony McNeil, who's also on the call with us, will be assisting with Q&A. Dr. McNeil is a BTLI inaugural fellow and our prolific and awesome artist in residence and worship leader. And now, just to give you a little context about the program and to just share why we are all here today. The third week of July is a very special week in the life of the Black Theology and Leadership Institute. Professionally, I will say for me, professionally, this week is a capstone week, the capstone week of my professional life. I love BTLI, and I love the fact that the energy and the sort of kind of historically Black college energy that we create each year happens in July, and I'm grateful for that. As a community of faith leaders and clergy, we have shared so many cultural and societal milestones, too many to name, in fact, in the pursuit of justice. We have protested, cried, laughed, and lifted each other up. Throughout this time, we have heard 6 exceptional preachers in residence, 70+ magnificent scholars who have led and taught us, 35+ transcendent worship experiences, and nearly 300 beloved fellows, many, many, many of who are on this call and a part of this workshop today. In that time, we have created this vast network of clergy and faith leaders who are in all of their respective spaces reimagining justice and changing the life of the modern church in our society. BTLI was housed first in the Office of Continuing Education at Princeton Seminary, and as of last July 2019, the Institute lives in the Center for Black Church Studies. The interim director of our Center for Black Church Studies is the Reverend Kermit Moss, Sr., who is also on the call today, and again, I am grateful for his presence. This week, we are honored to have webinars led by 3 phenomenal scholars. The Reverend Dr. Brad Braxton will lead us on the theology of worship on Wednesday, July 15th. And on Friday, July 17th, on the ethics of worship, we will be led by the Reverend Dr. Ebony Marshall Turman. And of course, today, we are delighted and honored, so honored to be here with the Reverend Dr. Alisha Lola Jones to participate in the art of worship, proclamation, practice, and protest in a pandemic. As I said to Dr. Jones before our call and a check-in, and with her and with Dr. McNeil, her name has come up dozens of times. You have to get Dr. Jones here, you have to get her connected, and I'm just eternally grateful that it's happening today and that she will also be a leader in BTLI when we do meet face-to-face again. I'm very hopeful in 2021. The Reverend Dr. Alisha Lola Jones is a fourth-generation Word of Faith Pentecostal preacher, music minister, and consultant for seminaries, music conservatories, and performing arts organizations on curriculum, programming, and content development. Dr. Jones is an assistant professor in the Department of Folklore and Ethnomusicology at Indiana University, Bloomington, the leading institution in Black music research. Dr. Jones is a council member of the Society of Ethnomusicology and the American Musicology Society. In addition, she is the resident ethnomusicologist for the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Institute and co-chair of the Music and Religions section and the Society for Ethnomusicology liaison to the American Academy of Religion. Dr. Jones' book, Flaming, The Peculiar Theopolitics of Fire and Desire in Black Male Gospel Performance, which is currently out and a must-buy, breaks ground by analyzing the role of gospel music making in constructing and renegotiating gender identity among Black men. For more information about Reverend Dr. Jones, please visit dralisha.com or find her on Twitter at Dr. Alisha L. Jones. Reverend Dr. Jones, we are so pleased to have you today, and we look forward to your presentation and conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Sushama, so much for all the work that you've been doing behind the scenes to make sure that this event takes place. And I'm really honored to be a part of BTLI this year and next year. I'd like to also thank Reverend Kermit Moss, who I've been in conversation with over the years. It's good to see you. And of course, Dr. Tony McNeil, who has been a continuous support, collaborator, and even the subject of some of my research. Fascinating human being. And I'm looking forward to engaging all of you all today. I was scrolling through and I see some for real folks, some for real people who do this thing in real life. So I'm excited to engage you all however we can through Zoom. And hopefully I will learn from you as you learn from me and each other today. I'll be toggling as we do with Zoom. So I already thank you for your patience with me as I move back and forth and engage you. So as was mentioned, I'm an ethnomusicologist. I'm also a musicologist. I study both people and their relationship to music making, and then the musical work, how we engage the performance of music historically and in today's time. Today, in consultation with the organizers of this event, I've been prompted to engage some of my research in order to illustrate the art of worship. And I think right now, given this pandemic and even in this social and cultural climate, it's important to keep before us ideas of justice and the ways in which justice figures into what we believe the art of worship to be. And in fact, I started this journey of thinking about justice in worship or the art of worship, collaborating with Dr. McNeil early with a seminary through online education. And since then, I've continued to build upon that line of research. So I'm going to share the screen. And actually, before I share the screen, I can see many of you. If you would, I love to engage folks that I'm working with. So for those of you who are open to engagement, could you just show me your hands? Just show me your hands. But if I were to do, extend that technology beyond that phrase that as soon as you hear it, you know what's coming. As soon as you hear, if you're happy, you know it's like, you know that it's an automatic participatory song. However, depending on where you are in this country and how you learned that particular song, it might vary, especially in churches. There are various ways that people sing this song. This is not the only melody and rhythm attached to that phrasing. If I were to mic toss, there are people from North Carolina. Actually, we did this in Chautauqua, and there was a person, African-American from North Carolina, who did an entirely new melody to me of the song. But there are even ways in churches that they've adapted this particular musical piece. But how many could tell that as soon as I started singing that phrase, you knew exactly what to do? It was almost as though it was involuntary, by a show of hands. It was almost as though, yes. And that is a part of what comes along with oral transmission of music. There are ways that the information is instantly downloaded. Entire pieces, that's an entire piece to clap, to do choreography, to do body percussion, to do a particular rhythmic pattern. Now, if you were in a Pentecostal church, they might do a little bit of variation boldly with interlocking rhythms. That is a part of the performance practice of that particular setting. But there's instant information that is downloaded. However, I want to challenge us today, even in the practice and hearing of that particular song. So here I will share a screen. Okay. And as I challenge you, I want to do so by moving from passive to active participation within our understanding of the art of worship. Then I want to talk a little bit about worship and justice, and even setting the atmosphere. And if we have time, we'll talk about justice for musicians. But we know that this particular presentation day is just, it's but a taste, a foretaste of what you will experience next year. So we did, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. And I would offer that with this sort of activity, granting people the space who may not be able is important. There might be people who might have a broken arm, for example, and are in a cast and may not be able to participate. Those sorts of details are important as we craft our worship experiences. But I want us to think about, though, that is a very accessible song, regardless of tradition, for those of us who were raised in the United States and are of a particular age. But what are the ways in which, if you're happy and you know it, might be a challenge for people participating in the song? What are the ways in which people may hear it and experience it not as a fun moment, but rather as a challenge or even an affront? Does anyone have any idea of how that might be experienced differently among people? I'm trying to select the chat. Actually, let me minimize the
Dr.
slideshow.
Jones, they can also raise their hands with the raise hand icon, and we can choose them.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, that's
we
helpful.
can help you with that. Yep.
Please do. So,
okay.
Because you know, it's hard to
see everything.
Yes. So how might this particular song that we may have learned in our childhood or at a camp or something like that, how might this be a challenge to someone, be heard as a challenge? Let me look at chat, or if anyone wants to raise their hand, I invite you to do so. Okay, I see some folks are raising their hand.
Why don't we,
let's
start with, I saw Daniel Heath. I see 3 hands. Yeah,
Hi,
let's start with Daniel Heath. Yeah.
How you doing, Reverend?
Doing well. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. The one thing that came to me is the question. There was a challenge that I heard, and the question is, how might someone hear this piece? And I'm just thinking about my deaf siblings, and they may not even hear the song. So we talk about orality, and that assumes that we're talking about one way of hearing. So
right.
I would love to hear us get on the same page about what is hearing. Are we talking about with ears and the like? But that's the first thing that bubbled up for me. Thank you.
Can I claim you as one of my students? We've studied together before, but you kind of know where I go with this. So this is good, Reverend. Anyone else? Who else would like to add to this? I saw someone post in the chat, this may be an emotional challenge.
Yep.
And this is Melody Panel. If there's a way for you to type a little bit more, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, David Jones, someone dealing with clinical depression might receive this very differently. If either of you could say a little bit or type a little bit more, that would be helpful. But absolutely, this sort of selection, though lighthearted and participatory, presumes that folks will participate regardless. However, on some level, we are asking people to be disingenuine. We are asking people to skip some steps in order to be in community. Dr. Jamie, hi, it's good to see you. Yeah, she thinks about that sometimes. I know professionally she is a person who walks with people at the end of life. She is, I believe she refers to herself as a death doula. So she understands these sorts of tensions immediately. But
Dr.
yes,
Jones, I also see Susan Rack had her hand
Okay.
up. Susan, did you want to share?
It occurred to me that people who are slower in body would be intimidated to clap, even if they were happy,
Right,
feeling that they would be out of sync with the group and make it.
right. And somehow that often translates into feelings of shame and inadequacy when people have unresolved feelings about their musicality in public spaces. I'll take a few more. This is good. You guys are thinking the way we want to think in this as we create art and worship. Yes.
You had hand up earlier, Rochelle Hines.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
Rochelle Hines.
Yes, I'm here. I actually was going to say it makes the assumption that you're happy, that you're already happy, and that your happiness is somehow is associated with your ability to move your limbs, while you may be feeling depressed in that moment, and therefore just to not be singled out, you may clap or stomp your feet or whatever directions you were given, yet you're dying inside. You're feeling hopeless and helpless, yet you're prompted to pretend that you're happy.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we'll continue to have more opportunities to engage each other. But you and I believe it was Melody and David, you all are getting at the sort of dimensions of how this might be difficult. However, in participatory traditions that we see in many Black churches, we see the if you're happy and you know it moment at the beginning of our worship experiences, where there are steps that are being skipped in order to arrive at that place of praise or that place of worship. And in doing so, we skip, I see you, Dr. Jamie, we skip the pastoral care moment. Because what then if after the call of if you're happy, the person says, but I'm not, I'm actually having an episode. What then are the moments that we can observe and anticipate where a person might come to a realization and recognition of where they stand and get the help and ministry that they really need? Dr. Jamie, what did you want to add?
No, you already went there. I was thinking about the work afterwards.
Mhm.
And then for many of us, I just clap without even thinking about whether I'm happy or not. I hear the song and I just clap. But I was going to say some of what you already said.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And so I want to both hold intention that there is a device at work with orally transmitted music where we can download information. And yet, with that power, with that technology, we have to make sure that we wield it and we engage it in very strategic and wise ways, knowing that there are moments and opportunities where pastoral care can be administered. So what would happen if, as you guys, decide to incorporate a song like this, people are able to share woes, share thorns, like they say in the corporate setting or in the classroom setting. What is your rose and what is your thorn? But people are able to hold both intention, those who are grieving, those who may be dealing with mental wellness issues. But making sure that as we use these devices, people are able to remain genuinely in community. So I started off with this just to test the temperature in the room. You guys are great. You participated. Participation, oral transmission, repetition are essential aspects of the aesthetics that we find in modern Black music performance, and especially when we gather in community in many charismatic Protestant contexts. And it's often critiqued as being, repetition is often critiqued as being very shallow, as being, as lacking depth, which it can when there is no storytelling that is occurring. And so as we think about the art of worship, I want to encourage us to consider what would it be like if we went back to the sort of origins of this technology. We associate these origins with the griot traditions of West Africa, where folks like us, music ministers, preachers, were all embodied in particular figures, the griot or the jali. These people who were the embodiment of the technology of the oral tradition, where the history, the commentary on everyday life was within that person. And through the repetition of those histories, people had a deeper sense of themselves as African beings. Okay, I see that there's a lot going on in the chat.
In the chat, yeah.
Yes, anything I need to know about?
I know there's a ton going on in the chat. Let's see. Yeah.
So right now I'm talking about some aesthetics, just to lay the groundwork for our conversation. Is there a question in there that I need to know of?
Let's see. Yeah, people are kind of giving some general questions to what you said earlier. One person had a question about recognizing the transformative power of music when we invite people to join in, even if they're not currently happy or feeling it. There's like 2 or 3 questions along those lines. Happiness is an emotional state that is mutable. No one is always happy. I don't know if you want to say something quickly about those seem to be a trend in the last couple of questions and comments, and then you can just keep moving forward.
Awesome. And I also see Dr. Donna Cox,
Yes,
a legend, who, if it's okay with you, Dr. Cox, I can't scroll to you, but I appreciate your presence because you offer to us another aspect to this. First, you typed that what about the fact that actually clapping is transformative? I agree, it is transformative. And I would say later on that a part of what I'm suggesting can occur is as we talk about these aesthetics, that it's important to be conversant, that as you are aware of the challenges that may be stirred up through participation in this repertoire or this liturgical move, that you present something else where a person who might have this particular difficulty, they might get their needs met as well. And also, Dr. Cox, if I can share, I appreciate your presence in music, in Black sacred music research, because of your particular abilities as a person who is a conductor. However, you have recently experienced challenges with vocalizing. There's a paralysis that you have experienced, and as a result, it has reshaped your ministry and how we understand being in musical community. A very humbling and transformative story that you present to us about the seasons of ministry even. So I hope I've gotten the gist of what you guys are mentioning. So as we think of these aesthetics, I'm also engaging some concerns that folks have posed with regard to the repetitive music that we hear, these formulaic approaches to music that we hear in Hillsong and Christian contemporary music. And as we realize the sort of power of using repetition, how we can passively participate, it is a way in which social control can be wielded when not done honestly. It can be a way that we can rehearse the familiar and the common memories that a particular community cherishes. It also, in a similar manner, can estrange participants if we don't know the way that they are different from the community that we've been engaging all along. Our social patterns from society are carried into worship, and those who are marginalized by society can be marginalized in our worship if we are unaware of what messages are being sent visually or orally through our musical ministry or our liturgical ministry. So I want us to think about moving from passive participation to active participation in our worship. And we do this by thinking of the art of worship as being a just activity, or that justice can be brought about through participation. Justice, as we know, is fairness, is justness, is fair play, fair-mindedness. Equity, equity is a buzz term that we see these days. But even in the aesthetic qualities that we prize within our music, we can cultivate justice. Letting people know that learning by ear or by rote is just as sophisticated as learning using the written text. That's a form of dealing with fairness, because many of us on here know that there are skill sets that we have learned through performing vernacular musics, as they say, or musics in the church, that we would never have encountered in schools of music or in conservatories. Learning how to transcribe on site for many instrumentalists, or mic tosses for vocalists, where you have to sing or play an impromptu song, almost like a challenge by another minister to show how the Spirit can move. These are aspects of our tradition that can reveal our thoughts about justice. And then, of course, from justice, we get just, to be just, morally right and fair, and being exact in how we administer care to the folks we are engaging. I also want to ask, well, what is worship? Now, some I did a little poll on social media. Some would describe worship as a way of experiencing intimacy with God. And for those of you who know my research, you know that that is a very interesting domain to me to think about what intimacy with God comprises. In terms of liturgical thought, Christian worship in particular, it encompasses a historical dimension that is shaped by events that of which we are aware, that can be chronologically set out. We could talk about the founding parents of the faith. We could talk about our local traditions, our local theology. And then secondly, Christian worship is provisional, recognizing the limited nature, let me move this up, the limited nature of what we do. Then it can signal the reign and justice and mercy that we experience through the divine. And lastly, and this I'm getting from White and Johnson, it celebrates the holy violence of conversion. Now here, I underlined their points to acknowledge that such a history and such a lineage can also reveal to us a shared memory of a colonial past, the way that this violence may in fact be unholy, unjust. As we think about Christian worship, one of the prized aspects for folks, at least in Black worship traditions and Protestant charismatic traditions, is the idea of setting the atmosphere. And I'll pause here to see, has anyone ever heard of this term, setting the atmosphere? Show of hands? Show of hands, okay, great. Does anyone want to share what setting the atmosphere is to them? Burrell Billingsley? Go for it.
So from a classical perspective, setting the atmosphere would be invoking the presence of the Holy Spirit or the Holy Ghost. From an Afrocentric perspective, it's the idea of awakening and invoking the presence of the ancestors to part of the service in which you are taking part of.
All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay. I think I see a Susan. Yep. Susan is raising her hand. Did I?
Yep. You did see Susan. Susan, you can go ahead.
She's muted.
Is she muted?
Muted. She's still muted.
Yeah. Here she is. Go ahead, Susan.
Setting the atmosphere for me can be arranging the worship space. So for instance, I was preaching the 7 days of creation, and the first in the series was chaos, and I scrambled the furniture in our multi-purpose space and made an atmosphere of chaos for us to feel to experience with our bodies before addressing that topic.
Now, I want to tell you something. As soon as you said this, because you were talking about ambiance, you were talking about arranging chairs, a lot of the music ministers that I know, the African-American music ministers they said, I saw this nonverbal, because setting the atmosphere culturally, setting the atmosphere culturally for many folks in Black churches is a little different. It can encompass, arranging the pews. It can, it can be how we have the crucifix. And I saw, I hope, Sierra, I saw your face. Can I just tag you in? I don't know you, but your face is where my eye landed. What was your thought?
It was wonderful. Well, I as someone who grew up in a historic Black Baptist church that used to be a Jewish synagogue, the connection to space is so interesting and different cross-culturally. There are things that you do not touch. There are things that cannot physically move. And so I'm always interested, inspired, and inquisitive about situations particularly when I hear white brothers and sisters talking about the freedom with which they are able to move and change certain things. And some of that is things that were passed down to us late and that we now just hold on to. Like there were situations where we got a thing and it was like, that is the gift of the pre-existing Christian culture to you, but now you don't know that you can change it. It's malleable.
Good. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot.
No problem.
I'll read to you actually a passage that opens up my book, Flaming. You see flaming everywhere. You know, I want y'all to remember there's a book out there. And I start off by talking about this or writing about this. Quote, being able to quickly find the address of God, end quote, was multi-Grammy Award and Stellar Award-winning gospel music producer Donald Lawrence's way of describing the most prized musical competency in music ministry at the 2017 Hawkins Music and Arts Conference in Chicago. Within historically African-American Pentecostal worship, a minister's capability to get to God instantly and usher God's presence into worship seamlessly is referred to in the vernacular as setting the atmosphere. To achieve this contact with God, ministers teach believers to seek God first, and all men will be drawn unto God, and by extension, the assembly of believers. Setting the atmosphere requires a form of self-giving. And actually, one of the scholars at Princeton has written on self-giving. I didn't reach out to him today, but one of the professors there is an expert in self-giving, where they prepare congregants to be receptive to the move of the Spirit through ministers' skillful interplay of message and music. Vocal music ministers in particular use the body aesthetically and sonically to stimulate and inflame transcendence among participants. They tap into the Pentecostal and gospel music traditions to take people there. That is, to happiness, to joy, to lovemaking, to heaven, in sensually and even sexually conservative religious spaces. Gospel singing in particular is at once understood as worshipful, erotic, and sensual activity for both performers and listeners, in which fire and desire are ignited through the process of encountering God, the one described in the Bible as a consuming fire. However, setting the atmosphere is more than collectively experiencing the performative qualities of a worship leader's spiritual fire. The telos of setting the atmosphere is to fulfill participants' expectations to have a tangible encounter with God during the worship experience. All right, I see the chat block is hot.
Yep, it is, Dr. Jones. And also Joseph Reeves has had a hand up for a bit of time. So I'll let him, and then we'll follow the chat too.
Great, thank you, Joseph. And Reverend Kyle, I see you. I'm coming back to you.
Yeah.
So some of my raising my hand was actually, hi, yes, from Proctor, hi, how are you?
I'm great.
And some of it, is I know Sierra from the chapel at HU, I see you. But some of that raising the hand was me trying to figure out how to raise my hand.
Oh, okay.
So yes, setting the atmosphere is for us definitely about invocation, and for us it's about connecting to the Africanity of Black Christianity. So like actively inviting spirit, but something that also came up for me, even kind of like going back to like our starting conversation around the if you're happy and you know it piece, kind of like the whole forced hugging during passage of the piece that we do, and kind of like particularly like within the Black Christian experience, kind of like this whole notion of like touch your neighbor and like turn around. I don't feel like touching my neighbor, and I don't feel like my neighbor touching me. And no, I don't want to turn around 3 times. But even that, like you like understand the importance, because even that kind of like connects, is about trying to connect the Black Christian experience to like African principles of like communalism, and also kind of like knowing that worship is something that you're supposed to bring like your full self to. So that's what
Oh yeah,
on my mind this year.
So in other iterations of this, and in the larger course that I talk about this in, one of the issues that I address and actually have gotten a lot of pushback on as we think of the art of worship, the aesthetics, which comprise, as you mentioned, the sort of communal, participatory aspect where you literally touch your neighbor when prompted, and you do so, you're expected to do so automatically, enthusiastically, and uncritically. However, as you suggest, and as I assert, or as you assert as well, that is also a moment where we could be teaching people about consent. We could be teaching people that they can decline and there is no love lost. That it is righteous to have a decision. We love to talk about free will. But yes, I agree that it's in these moments where we could teach our young people, if you're not feeling it, don't hug that person. My mom did that. There were folks, people would bring their beloved to church. And I was one of those kids that when I felt it, I said it. I would say, Mom, I don't feel right about so-and-so. And my parents took that seriously. And often it would come out in the wash that this little one actually was sensing, you off, something ain't right. Something ain't right. Man, y'all got so much. Okay.
I know,
I'm going to say this because I know time is winding down. What we've tried to establish right now is the framework of the aesthetic possibilities when we're talking about the art of worship, particularly or transmission, and how when it is not wielded with authority, it can just be a passive tool. But it can be a tool for active participation. If I had to choose between things that I would like to leave you with, I want to leave you with one other thing. I'm hoping that you'll join us for a longer workshop next year. I want to say that as we are thinking about the aesthetics and setting the atmosphere, I want us to understand that the personnel themselves, the musicians, also play a role in the art of worship. So how congregants, or in performance theory, how the audience experiences that music minister, whether they are an instrumentalist or a vocalist, that matters. And it's a reflection of the social and cultural work that congregation has been doing, as well as the sort of facility that congregation or audience is permitting that musician to walk in. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So if your congregation, because of its local theology, is off-put by a person who ministers in jeans, then they could actually miss out on an expanded understanding and encounter with God. And I know we all have have different ways that we come to this conversation theologically. However, I do want to challenge, how can our local theology actually bar us from expansive experiences? So here, I want to listen with you all. I want to do what we as music researchers do best. And I want to provide an opportunity for us to listen to a piece together. Now, I wanted to share, it's not allowing me to share, so I'll just play it. And as I play this, I want you to think about the role of the music minister in setting the atmosphere and establishing the aesthetics, okay? Let me play the selection. And the specific question I have for you is, how might you describe this voice? And some of you will immediately recognize this voice. Don't say who it is or anything like that, but just give me words of describing this music minister's sound. Let's take a listen. And please give me a thumbs up if you can hear the music that I am playing. Let's see. Okay.
Yeah. We don't hear it yet, right? No one hears it yet? Okay. I see the heads. Not yet.
Nothing? Nothing at all?
Nothing.
Well, nothing yet.
Okay, let me see, because I'm playing it now. Let me see about, am I able to share? It wouldn't let me share just now. Oh, share computer sound. Let me see, maybe that'll work. Okay.
Yeah, I can vaguely hear it, but not through your computer. Yeah. Yeah.
Can y'all hear it at all?
Just like a little.
Let me try.
One look, only one look, one look at Jesus, and my cares, they will all pass away. Only one look was all I needed, and my life has been forever changed. One look, only one look, one look at Jesus, and my care.
And so now I will share the video because I figured it out. It's back. It wasn't letting me share it. So I see all that you have been placing. In the interest of time, I'll just show you what you've been listening to. I see you, Roger. I see your face, Roger.
Was all I need.
Reverend Alston, I see you.
And my life has been forever changed. Then I saw him. Yes, I saw him. And he blessed my soul, and he blessed my soul, and he blessed my soul without a word. He blessed my soul, and he blessed my soul, and and he blessed my soul without a word.
So I observed your faces as we switched to the slides. That was Thomas Allen, who has a new CD out. He is a trained countertenor. We also have some other countertenors on the line, namely the legendary Reverend Kent Austin, who is on here. But many of you, I saw your realization as you experienced his ministry. Reverend Pat thought this was Tremaine Hawkins. Well, I love Tremaine Hawkins. That's not a bad comparison. Yes, it is. The song is Andy Bless My Soul by the composer Anita Watkins Stevens. But my point here is that he has a rare vocal designation like Reverend Ken Austin, who called countertenor. It is a vocal type that has often been referred to as resembling the sound that we might associate with women. And I think it's useful to listen to this particular example, one of a few that I had planned for you guys, where as we position ourselves to set the atmosphere, a lot of us have confused the repetition in our worship with monotony. And that as we are seeking for God to do a new thing, there might be vessels and different forms of giftedness that because of our own biases, they may not be permitted to use their giftedness. In this case, countertenors are a musical, are vocalists who have an exceptional gift, but because of the lack of exposure to how to engage them musically, we may be missing out on some really, as we say, anointed or divinely approved experiences within our worship. So, Sushama, how am I?
Yes. You know what? It became so robust and wonderful. You're good on time. I would love if we could, and I'm conscious of time, we got 10 minutes. If we could still get a couple questions, because I feel like in the chat especially, there are a few that we did not get to, including one from, I think Kyle had one on holy violence that you said you would follow up on. So that one, and maybe one or two more, I'll breeze through the chat. And if people remember that they had one that was really pressing, if you raise your hand. And then we can close closer to 4, okay? But you're in good time. You're in a good place.
Yes, Reverend Kyle, it's so good to see you. Yes, I definitely think that that framework that White and Johnson offer to us can be complicated, especially again, with our hearing and reading of it as people of African ancestry in a Christian context. We know that that holy violence has really often not just been this imagined spiritual moment, but it has been a colonial moment. It has been a moment where people who have thought they were loving us, who thought they were missionizing us, they missed the mark in large ways. That's a gentle way of saying it. But that holy conversion, again, is not easily translatable to our experience as people of African ancestry living in the United States. So yeah, I like you, would complicate that part of the framework, that it's not just a spiritual, romantic imagination akin to a superhero, but it really has had some lived, historical, long-standing implications, that sort of vision.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dr. Jones, I saw a couple of questions. I'm kind of running through themes too. There was a group of questions about worship during COVID, during this COVID moment. If you could speak to that.
Yes. So can I put COVID and Black Lives Matter together?
Please do, absolutely. All of our pandemics.
Yes, yes, racism is being described as a pandemic. COVID is being described as a pandemic. And as we think of the art of worship, which is now relying on technology, I'm seeing a lot of intimate shed sessions where musicians are gathering to record still in addition to these streamed compilations that folks are doing. But through this, folks are, there's a new song called Rose Petal, which likens the bodies of Black people to rose petals on the ground. A beautiful song that was released on YouTube that I heard. Folks are releasing hymns that are not just metaphoric, but they are actually helping folks to lament and name the injustices. Even people like Kirk Franklin, who we love to, you know, both, you know, listen to his music, but also critique his theology. He's even responding to this moment of Black Lives Matter. And with the song Thank You, Lord, that framed the description of our time together, in my book, I talk about Thank You, Lord as addressing another pandemic, that of HIV/AIDS, being a part of a potential repertoire for those who are dealing with narratives of tainted blood. But it could also be heard as it could also be heard as not taking into account the hardship of others. So again, as we apply our songs, being aware of who might be off-put and who might be brought in as we design the conversation in our worship experiences. There's
Thanks,
so much.
I know, Dr. I know I'm trying to catch up with some of them. This one's good about wanting to hear more about justice, care for musicians, music directors. Yeah, wanting to hear more about caring for those folks.
Okay. Much of my work focuses on how we can hear or listen to musical gifts differently. I will say that, like many folks, musicians are expressing their difficulty emotionally in this time. And here we have an interesting aspect of Black worship, in that Black music in general, which has accompanied everyday life, and then Black worship, these musics are often made commodities. They are made for profit. And so a lot of these musicians who are trying to figure out their livelihood as worship leaders are feeling a particular intensity and pressure to produce something that responds to the moment, to uplift people and to be useful. And I want to just give caution to the pastors on the line that in this moment, they need community. They need that pressure to be removed, and for their faith communities to understand that this is an opportunity to provide them with care and time to refuel, replenish, and reprioritize how they view themselves as leaders in their communities. But kind of deal with what you are sensing in this political moment.
Yeah, that's good. Let's take this last question. And then if you want to have some closing remarks, and then I'll close this out, Dr. Jones. This question is regarding justice for singers. Can you speak to ways that we can teach congregations and pastors to consciously view singing as proclamation, as opposed to the appetizer that sets the atmosphere or comes in preparation to proclaim the preached word?
Who wrote that?
Sierra.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sierra. So often I find myself as a clinician reminding pastors that at least within historically Black Protestant forms of worship, the singer is expected to have some sort of theological or inspirational contribution to the worship experience. And often, in terms of the hierarchy of compensation, they are the least compensated, though they have to function in these multi-vocational ways. And so I think it starts with our terminology. Vocalists are musicians too. Number two, competency. How we understand these vocal musicians is not just that they have to have musicianship and be competent in that musicianship, but they also are expected to be to have a devotion of their own and come in with a word. And then camaraderie among musicians, that the instrumentalist can understand the integral part that the vocalist plays within the tying together of what the worship experience is to be. But traditionally in African American worship literature, the preacher, the musician, and then the Holy Spirit, we know Du Bois, are essential parts of how traditionally African American music has been theorized. African American worship has been theorized. And in my experience, those who understand the vocal worship leader as a colleague of the pastor, those ministries that do that in a more equitable way often receive beautiful fruit from that collaboration. But I think it's important to not diminish their role. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for that. That's a great question. Thanks for the question too. Dr. Jones, any last parting words for us? That was like the fastest hour ever.
Oh my goodness.
That was the fastest hour. Okay.
So this, I suppose this is a teaser.
Tease away.
And this is but a snippet of a longer workshop that we're going to have next year, just giving you some aesthetic possibilities within the art of worship. I do want to share, as I've mentioned, my book is out, and the ideas like setting the atmosphere, the countertenor, how we might hear and listen to each other differently are addressed in the book. For those of you who want to get the book from me, we can make arrangements for me to autograph it. My fiance is posting information in the chat for you guys to get it. And I look forward to discussions that will be generated from this workshop and from the book. And I look forward to seeing you guys next year. You're just going to have to come next year.
Yeah, we like that. Good, good pub. Excellent, excellent. And how should we work on? They can order it, and what's the best way to work on getting an autograph?
So if you email me or email us at Dr. Alisha L. Jones at gmail.com, and just send your address, the name to whom you would like it autographed. It's $42 for shipping, handling. We got to get it to us and then we got to send it to you. And and my Cash App for that is Dr. Alisha Lola Jones for Cash App. Dr. Alisha L. Jones at Gmail to send your information, and Dr. Alisha Lola Jones for Cash App. Thank you in advance for your support and for continue the conversation.
Yeah, well, this is like literally a taste, and we can't wait to have you in 2021 and appreciate everything about this presentation and about the conversation today. Can we give like what do you do on Zoom? Can we do a Zoom clap? Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Dr. Jones.
Thank you.